Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sovereign Lovestream.
Hi, happy Sovereign Sunday.
Happy Sovereign Sunday.
Thank you for joining us today. We are your hosts, Danny Panzella, Vanessa Velez, and this week we're talking, we're going to discuss a pretty heavy topic.
Yeah, I'm already a little bit upset in kind of just preparing for this show. We're going to talk about corporal punishment, about whether or not spanking children is healthy and appropriate and emotional. And do you want to introduce, we want to show a video clip, and you want to introduce that?
Yes. This week, while scrolling through TikTok and other social media networks, a video has apparently been going viral, and it's, as most of you know, some kids in different states are starting school already, and because of the whole pandemic, there's the virtual learning and not everybody is going back to classrooms. Some kids are still starting school from home, and there was a video of an Hispanic little boy it's his first day of kindergarten, and it shows the mom, or what we presumed to be the mom, sitting next to him, holding the belt down by her side, as if, as a threat, I guess, that if he doesn't pay attention or if he doesn't behave, she has the belt there ready to spank him. And it's intended to be a funny video. There's laughter, is the sound in the background, and thousands of people have commented on the post, and everybody's just talking about how this is giving them flashbacks of their own childhood, how of course this kid is going to learn, this is the way to do it. There's a comment that says, for those saying how can he learn with the belt, and she's like, trust me, he's going to learn. People getting flashbacks. Some of you weren't whooped as a kid, and it shows. And there were obviously some concerned comments saying this is absolutely child abuse and it's traumatic, and others calling them Karens for expressing concern. People calling this motivational learning. If you're upset about this, you must not be Hispanic. This is all, it seems to be super normalized in not just Hispanic cultures, it seems like in many cultures, but this just happens to be a video of an Hispanic child. And it was pretty alarming to see that, that people take this as a joke.
Yeah, I mean, just if I play the soundtrack. It's a joke. How many of the emojis being shared are laughing? It's the belt for me. RIP to that little kid.
Not a normal teaching strategy, but very effective.
And like just how it was taken so lightly. Like, this is what's happening here. This woman is holding the threat of the belt over a kindergartner. Like, how misbehaved could a kindergartner be that you can't control? The only option you have to help is a belt. But I want to show another video. Give me a second. Sorry, this is one of the first times I'm using this to share, but I want to show this other video. Because this is the next step right here. This is what happens next if he doesn't behave.
Sit your ass down.
And that's enough, because that's all I can really take of that.
It's and it's like the emojis on the bottom of the video are all laughing emojis. Like, this is a hilarious thing,
it's a joke.
It's a joke to many people. People find humor in disciplining your children by beating them. There's a whole movement right now. There is a Facebook and Instagram, and I believe maybe a Twitter, It's Latinx parenting, and they've begun a whole movement called End Chancla Culture. And there's this whole joke about Hispanic moms throwing their slipper, their flip-flop, their shoe, whatever at their kid, or beating them with the slipper, with the chancla, for misbehaving. And it's become a joke. It's become a meme. It's become things that people share and laugh about. And it's like, yeah, it happened to me when I was a kid and I ended up just fine. And the fact that we think that we're just fine based on, after experiencing abuse as a child just goes to show we are not just fine. The fact that people are laughing about the threat of violence on a child who is 5-6 years old means we're not fine. There's nothing fine or funny about it. If this was a video of a man threatening to hit his wife if she didn't do what he wanted, we would all be up in arms and saying that
wanting to call police,
that this is abusive behavior and that this woman is a victim of domestic violence. But it's a child, and we share it and we laugh and we say, yep, that was me and I turned out just fine. That is not just fine.
Yeah. So in the comments already, we already have different points of view. Some people agree that children never need to be hit. And then others are saying, come on, he wasn't in danger. Spanking is necessary sometimes. Okay. So and then there's other comments that are more joking. And you know what? Spanking between consensual adults, that's between you.
If that's your thing, go for it.
But, I wonder if there's ever been a study between kids who got spanked and then adults who have spanking fetishes. If maybe there's a connection there, right?
I would imagine.
I've shared on this show about how I had, I had sexualized my mommy issues, right? I felt like my mother didn't pay enough attention to me as a child. Then as an adult, I was seeking the attention of females. I kind of was trying to, in a warped way, replace the love of my mother with the attention of females, sexual attention from females. So I don't know how many children who were spanked and, had to reconcile the fact that the person was telling them, I love you and I'm doing this for you and this hurts me more than it hurts you. Bullshit, it hurts me more than it hurts you. But like, how many kids are trying to like integrate that? And so then they're like, they allow their spouses to beat them, either consensually through S&M play or non-consensually by staying with an abusive domestic partner, right? So I don't know. I don't know if there are any studies on that, but maybe there should be. And I would not be surprised if we found that there was a connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there, as we said, there have been debates online ever since this video has been circulating the internet, and there are people who are just like, it's fine. Like we saw right now, he's not hurt. He's not in any real danger. And one of the things that got me thinking was like the basic, I don't need to do any major studies to have this thought of anytime that you're under a threat of violence, your body goes into fight or flight mode, right? It's a given. If you throw something at someone, immediately the reaction is going to be to protect themselves. So if you have a child who is constantly under the threat of violence, that child is constantly in fight or flight mode. And as much as you tell the child, I love you and I'm doing this for your own good, this hurts me more than it hurts you, the child is a human being with a normal nervous system that is automatically going to defend itself. That's just the way it is. That's how we're built. So the idea that there's no effect on a child if they're spanked, if the parent tells them why they're being spanked, or if the parent tells them, I love you and I'm doing this because I love you, the body is still going to go into fight or flight mode. That's a given. There's no debate about that. That's automatically what's going to happen. So what are the effects of going into fight or flight mode constantly? There's a surge of different hormones. These different hormones, adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, all these hormones are rushing through the body. And as we've learned through the studies about neuroplasticity and how the body reacts to these hormones, our bodies become addicted to those hormones. They get used to, if I'm constantly getting spanked or being threatened with a spanking, my body is going to release those hormones. If my body does it so often, eventually it becomes addicted to those hormones. And there have been studies out there that show that children who've been beaten tend to end up turning to substance abuse at some point in time, because there's a lack of those. They're addicted to those hormones, and so they find that
they get that hit of adrenaline or cortisol from doing dangerous things,
exactly.
Right? Putting themselves in danger or engaging, even if it's subconsciously. If your spouse is beating you and it's releasing those same cortisol and other hormones that were released when your parents spanked you, then you're subconsciously making an association. Oh, this is love. He loves me. He's disciplining me, or she's disciplining me because they love me. And you make that connection. And it's a lot of times it's subconscious. And we wonder why domestic abuse partners, victims of domestic abuse stay in those relationships and many times make excuses. They may not always consciously understand it, but on a subconscious level, they believe this is love.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never spanked my son. My son is 9 years old, and thank God that I had come across a lot of this research, and I had friends in my life who had taught me about peaceful parenting. And there are a lot of arguments that I heard for peaceful parenting that I had never heard before, and just made a lot of sense. So we have studies now that show that kids who are not spanked have higher IQs. And at first, this seems like, that must be propaganda. How could spanking affect a person's IQ? But if you think about it in just a kind of a detached, objective sense, if a child misbehaves, if a child does something, I don't know, whatever the example you can come up with.
Throws a temper tantrum.
A child is throwing a temper tantrum. If you hit that child, what do they learn? They learn that force is an acceptable response to disagreement, right? I'm doing something, my mother disagrees with it. So if she thinks hitting me, so then what happens when their sibling does something they disagree with? Well, mommy hits me when I don't obey her, so I should hit my sister when she doesn't obey me. It teaches children that force is a legitimate way to solve conflict. And, this is really, I believe, an integral part of how statism has become or is such an accepted thing in our society, right? What is statism? The government spanks us when we disobey a law. And most people believe this is right. This is the way it should be. If you disobey a law, you should be spanked. Now, I'm not saying that there's no place for defensive force. There's absolutely a place for defensive force. Hitting a child or government putting a gun to a person's head for not wearing a seatbelt are not legitimate uses of force. That's not self-defense. That's not defensive force in any way. It's completely inappropriate. So that's one way. If you are instead using logic with the child, right, and teaching them, we don't do this because of this. We don't touch the stove because we're going to get our fingers burnt. I don't need to slap my son to teach him not to touch the stove. I can explain to him rationally. I can show him the fire and say, look, I can even let him get his hand close enough to feel the heat without actually burning it, right? And I can use that as a teaching moment to help him learn and understand the logic behind the things that we try to teach our children as parents, things that we might be tempted to want to spank them for, right? To teach them those lessons. So of course, a child who is rationally and logically explained why not to do something is going to have a higher IQ than a child who is told, because I said so, bam, if you don't, right? I mean, it just makes logical sense.
What ends up happening is because you're in fight or flight mode, you're using your animalistic brain, right? You're at that point, there's no logic. It's just, I'm going to get hit and boom. There's no logic to it. It is what it is. And it's an instinct. Whereas when you rationalize with a child, you're exercising that logic brain. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing out. And some people try to rationalize it by saying, well, I hit my child, but then I explain why I explain to them why I did that. And there's still that correlation in the brain because the animal brain is taking over. Anytime that you're in a situation where your body or your life is at risk, your animal nature is going to step in, and it's not a rational mind. And so how can you possibly even understand what's being said to you when your body is in fight or flight mode? Your brain isn't ready to rationalize.
It's physically impossible. It's physically impossible in a moment of adrenaline and cortisol being pumped through your veins to be able to understand logic. So to hit a child and then try to explain to them logic while they're weeping from being hit, it physically cannot happen. It's like a cop kneeling on somebody's neck for 9 minutes and telling them, stop resisting, stop resisting. Your body cannot help but resist. Your body is trying to protect its life as it's being choked out. It's an involuntary self-defense mechanism to save your life. And the kid is going through the same thing. He or she cannot process what's happening logically and say, oh, thank you, mommy. Thank you, mommy, for explaining to me that I shouldn't have touched the stove. And I appreciate the fact that you spanked me. And now I'm crying and my butt hurts, but yeah, I'm able to logically integrate this lesson. I appreciate that. Like, it's just so illogical. Forget about the fact that it's immoral, because we can get to that part. We can get to the moral argument against harming a child to teach them a lesson. And the whole might makes right mentality, which is really what spanking teaches. Right. And then we wonder why people think, yeah, well, we have to obey government no matter what. It's for our safety. It's for our good. Right. I mean, that's clearly where that stems from, that lesson that many of us learned as children. Now, I'm lucky that while I was spanked, it was rare. And I was a bad kid. No, I take that back. I wasn't a bad kid. I was a very talkative kid. I didn't stay silent when I was told to. I was a very active kid. I didn't always sit still when I was told to. And, that brings a whole other topic of adults having unrealistic expectations or even unfair expectations of how children should behave. And to expect kids to be totally silent or totally motionless, at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, or even 10 years old is irrational in and of itself and is really more about control than it is about discipline or, teaching kids to be moral or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it goes into the whole idea of needing to domesticate each other, right? You're domesticating a child by stopping them from exploring, from expressing themselves, from being themselves. We live in a society where we complain about the constant domestication of our society, right? We go to work, do a 9-to-5 job. The majority of people are miserable because they have these expectations that they have to meet. And it's because we weren't meant to live that way. And children are born into this world free. They are literally free of all of this mental slavery that we've been conditioned to believe is the way of life. And because they express themselves, because they're talkative, because they're curious about things, we want to stop that. I mean, how many kids are diagnosed with attention deficit disorders? And I mean, what's wrong with the child's exploring? And that's not to say that there are imbalances out there. There might be, but nowadays it's like any child that's active, we want to find a way to calm this child down and keep them from asking us questions or bothering us or making noise. And it's irrational. It doesn't make any sense at all.
It comes from the children should be seen and not heard kind of mentality, right? Like adults are superior and children need to obey no matter what. And it's just, This topic is really, in the research, watching that video, here's this man beating either his children or his grandchildren and telling them, sit still. So he's got a three, like they look like 3, maybe 4 years old, and they're having trouble sitting still, whatever they're doing, whatever they're waiting for. It's a doctor. I don't know if it's a doctor's office or what, but he really felt like he was justified in beating that kid. And that was not like a slap on the hand, you know, like which is, I would still say is the same thing, but this is very different from you will sit still. Right. And a lot of the comments on that video with the mother with the belt, oh, he's going to learn today. Like, it's a good thing. Like, yeah, beat him with that belt if he doesn't pay attention to kindergarten. Like, what are they doing? Coloring over Zoom? Like, what? You don't color inside the lines, you're going to get the chancla. Like, what?
And I think that a lot of people kind of just accept it as it's okay because it happened to me. And the idea is, if I accept that this is wrong, then what happened to me was wrong, and that means my parents are bad. And that there's just so much to unpack in that it becomes overwhelming for people, and they just accept it.
Yeah. Honestly, I was having cortisol. Like, I still feel the effects of it, and it feels horrible. Right? Have you ever been, as an adult, have you ever been in a fist fight? If you can't remember, or you haven't had the experience of being spanked to that degree, have you ever been in a physical altercation with another adult and felt the adrenaline and felt the cortisol, or just feared for your life, maybe a car accident, and you feel that achiness, that sick feeling, that nervousness, your body's trembling, and that's what happens to children. It's the same hormonal profile. It's that fight or flight hormonal profile that your reptilian brain, not the frontal lobe, the conscious part of your brain, but the reptilian brain that controls fight or flight, that controls, your basic motor functions. The one that does not think rationally, it just reacts. It just reacts to stimuli. If the stimuli is violence, you're being physically attacked. And sorry, folks who are fans of spanking, this may trigger you, but spanking a child is a physical attack. The reptilian brain, the cortex, interprets that as a physical attack and then starts pumping those hormones through your child's body. And that's why they cry uncontrollably. And then what's the next thing? Yeah, I'll give you something to cry about, or fix your face. How many times have we heard those memes, right? Like, kids so upset about being attacked, and then the parents are going to gaslight them and make them feel like you're the problem here.
Because you have no reason to be upset. Because
you couldn't sit still, because you spilled the milk, because you did this, because whatever it is, right? And how many of the behaviors that we don't like that our kids do are inspired by us? How many of those behaviors did they learn by watching us? Even if they misinterpret something, right? Even if they misinterpret a joke between you and your partner or whatever, or a snarky comment or a sarcastic comment, and they use those same techniques, or they learn those behaviors and then use them on other kids, but don't know how to, like, they don't have the maturity, right? That adults presumably have, because clearly from the comments on that TikTok video, many adults are not as mature as they think they are. And then to turn around and say, well, I was spanked or I was beat with a chancla by my parents, and I turned out just fine. It's not fine if you think that using violence on a child is okay. That's not fine. I'm sorry.
And even if people aren't willing to see the psychological effects of that, just again, back to the basic fight or flight mode, and the hormones release, the way the hormones react inside the body can stunt a child's growth, can stunt a child's brain development, can lead to problems of obesity, can lead to hormonal imbalances. There are so many effects of being in constant fight or flight mode. And I totally get people saying, I'm totally fine, I don't have any issues. When your body is in constant fight or flight mode, your body becomes used to it. Just because your body's used to it, just because your body's used to being nervous and anxious, doesn't mean that it's normal. It's just accepted that it's your normal because you've been in that situation for so long. And people don't understand why they have chronic health issues, why they have, why they struggle with hormonal imbalances, with all these issues that we don't understand. There's no root cause. A lot of it is psychological. A lot of it does have to do with the hormones that are being released because you're in a constant fight or flight mode. So there absolutely is, there are physical side effects to beating a child.
Yeah, I want to address Nancy's comment. Too many young adults out there never got punished, no spanking, and now they are adult entitled brats. Abuse is not discipline, and you're confusing the two. TWO, she meant. You can discipline your children without physical force. I would say that physical force, as ATB has been saying, is intimidation, right? Holding the belt behind the kid's back, that imminent threat of, if you don't pay attention, you're going to get hit with the belt. That's a threat. That's intimidation, right? That's not explaining, honey, you need to sit through your lessons because you need to learn so you can become educated, so you can, and try to help the child understand what education is and why it's necessary. That's using logic. And you can do that in an empathetic way, in a caring way, in a loving way that promotes connection. Because when you promote connection with your child, when you hug your child, it releases what? Good hormones. What's the good hormone? Is it dopamine? What's the thing that when you hug for like 30 seconds, it releases that, it's the name of the hormone is escaping me right now.
I can't remember either. It might be dopamine.
If you need to discipline your child, why not hug your child? Let those good hormones, the hormones of love and connection, be released. And then they'll be like, oh, my mom loves me. My dad loves me. What was that you were saying, Dad? I shouldn't hit my sister because it doesn't promote a feeling of love. It promotes a feeling of separation.
Our bodies become used to, like we were saying before, we become addicted to the hormones that are released. If you're releasing happy hormones, good hormones that increase your health, your immune system. I mean, when you're in fight or flight mode, your immune system is lowered. Your body can't fight off infections or viruses or any of that. And so as we increase the good hormones, your body is able to take care, you're no longer fighting. It's not like waiting to protect itself. So it's able to continue its normal functions to keep you a healthy human being.
Oxytocin, that's it.
Oxytocin.
Thank you, ATB.
Thank you.
Dawn brings up a great point. And this was actually something that I had prepared for. And in some of my research for this, I came across Focus on the Family. Now, I grew up a born-again Christian, so I'm very familiar with Focus on the Family. So this is a conservative, Orthodox Christian, or maybe not Orthodox, it's born-again Christian. So they're very, very conservative and like strict by the Bible. And I went to their website, and even most Christians believe that the Bible says, and she brings it up, the scripture is spare the rod, spoil the child. Right. So what many Christians take from that is, if you don't spank your children, they're going to be spoiled. And what Dawn brings up is that the rod is referring to the shepherd's staff. Now, the shepherd doesn't beat the lamb, the sheep, with the staff. He uses the staff to guide them or defend them from wolves. So even on the Focus on the Family website, now they don't say that nobody should ever spank. They say spanking should only be used as a last resort and very sparingly. And they even say, if you are a parent who tends to be very emotional and very reactive, that you are not a parent that should spank at all. I was shocked because, quite honestly, growing up in the Christian church, where spanking is like, they're always defending spanking, like this is something we should be using because it says so in the Bible. For Focus on the Family, such an extreme, like, conservative Christian group, to say that, some parents spank in anger. And you know what? If you're a Christian and you believe in spanking, I encourage you, go to the Focus on the Family website and check out their articles on spanking, because I was really pleasantly surprised. I would have preferred them to say spanking is never appropriate, but At least I was pleasantly surprised to see that they were saying that it should be used as little as possible, and that it should not be used by parents who have trouble controlling their own emotions. And it went farther than that to say, if you're one of those parents, you need to be doing the work to teach yourself to get control of your emotions, which I think is huge and brings up another point that I think is very important, that sorry, that was accidental. It brings up another great point that a lot of parents use corporal punishment or physical discipline as a shortcut, right? Instead of us doing the work ourselves and getting control of our emotions, when kids do things to annoy us, we scream or throw up a fist or a hand.
And I think that's the wild thing, right? As adults, we have a more extensive language. Our brains are more developed, and there are still moments where we lose control. If we are so upset or frustrated by something that our child is doing, and our reaction is to hit the child, then that means we don't know how to process emotions.
Yep.
But we're expecting a child with a less developed brain to have the capacity to express their emotions in a way that's more acceptable to us. Then there's obviously a disconnect there. I mean, I think that the more in tune we are with our own emotions, the more we're able to handle our emotions, the less likely it will be that our kids will trigger us to the point where we feel the need to hit them. We've had situations in our home where, our 9-year-old has done things that sometimes are frustrating. I mean, he's a kid, right? I mean, all kids are going to do that. And we have sat down, had conversations with him.
Confession time. I'll confess. So me and Xander like to play Fortnite together. And Xander, if you've ever played the game or you know about the game, it's kind of like a mixture between a shooting game and Minecraft. So Xander, who loved Minecraft, is a builder. He likes to build these structures. And sometimes it's really frustrating to play with him because honestly, he's a lot better at the game than I am. I don't have the cognitive abilities. I'm getting old and I don't have the cognitive abilities to play as well as he does. And there are times that I get so frustrated that I will raise my voice, and I have screamed at him, like, stop doing that. Stop building walls in my face or whatever, right? And it's okay, right? It's okay to lose your temper. It's okay to, it's not okay, but like it's understandable. But when I catch my breath, like a few seconds later, I'm like, Xander, I'm sorry. I should not have screamed like that. I lost my temper and it was not appropriate and you didn't do anything wrong. You're just playing the game better than me. And I got frustrated and I'm sorry. And I think owning that, being able to apologize to our kids when we lose our temper is huge, because what we are teaching them is that it's okay to admit when we're wrong. It's okay to apologize. We don't have to dig in our heels. How many of you, honestly, how many of you parents have hit your children and then felt guilty? Now, I've never spanked Xander, but I felt tremendously guilty to the point like where I wanted to cry myself just for screaming at him like that, for losing my temper over something as stupid as a video game. So how many of us have done that? And how much guilt have we felt afterwards for doing that? We don't need to do that. We don't need to go there, right? We can, and it happens less and less. Because for me, losing my temper like that happens less and less because I'm focused on doing the work on myself, that I don't have to lose my temper over big things, never mind little nonsense like a video game, right? As parents, it's our responsibility to do that work, to become emotionally healthy ourselves and respond in healthy ways to negative stimuli, to conflict, so that we can model that for our kids. And if we're not doing that, but just resorting to spanking so that we get our way, ultimately that's what it is. We're not teaching them anything by spanking them other than to fear physical force. That's all we're teaching them, right? So it's a shortcut for parents. And I would challenge people, and I'm sorry if this has come across as preachy, because I think maybe I have been a little bit preachy through this episode. And I apologize because I know it's easy. And a lot of us don't know any better because this is how we were taught by our parents. You know, it's what was modeled for us as kids. And now it seems normal to us. So we do it to our kids.
And I think what happens is that as parents, we have this this pressure to do it right. And then once we make a decision, it's like, all right, well, we have to see it through, right? I started doing this. I can't change it now. Now, my parents are both my parents are both from Mexico, and they were raised in very small towns and in large families, and they both got beatings as children. And so when my siblings and I were younger, there were times that, yeah, we got spanked for misbehaving. And as time went on, my parents have always been interested in learning and in, expanding their consciousness, and they came across books about parenting and understanding the harm that physical violence against your children can cause on your children. And they were like, oh my God, we've been doing this wrong. Like, this isn't the right way. And we've had conversations over the years as we were teenagers into our 20s and 30s. And even now, recently, my dad, we brought up a situation where he had spanked my sister for something, and he just kind of shook his head and he was like, I didn't know better. I didn't know that was not the way. And, I'm glad that I was able to catch on to things early enough that I didn't continue that pattern. He goes, but yeah, that I did that, and I didn't know better. And to have that conversation, I think we respect our parents, my siblings and I, because my parents are willing to admit to their mistakes. They're willing to say, I did that because I didn't know any better. Now I know better. I'm not willing to do that. And obviously now we're adults, so I wouldn't expect them to still be spanking us. But even when we were younger, they had come to that conclusion, and they were like, this is not okay, and I don't want to do that. And we learned to have more conversations as a family, we've had family meetings, and we get together and we kind of discuss the issues at hand. And they're not perfect. My parents are far from perfect. I'm far from perfect as a parent, as a co-parent, step-parent. But we're learning, and we're willing, like Danny said, we're willing to have the conversations with Xander and tell him, hey, we did this thing, and we don't want to do that anymore. We're sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't respect what you wanted. We've had conversations in the past where if we don't like a behavior that he's exhibiting, we have sat down and talked with him, and we've given him the reasons why we don't like it. And we get into the nitty gritty. What do you feel about it? What do you think about that? And we've had FaceTime calls with his mother as well for it to be we're all on the same page, so we can all communicate with each other. And it's really hard. It's really hard to co-parent. It's really hard to be a step parent, but we've developed a relationship that's open enough for all of us to be on the same page, to communicate about the ways that we're choosing to discipline. And we are all on board with a peaceful parenting situation. And we've been able to talk to him about things. There have been times where he's been a little bit rebellious. I mean, like I said, he's not a perfect child.
So I'll give you an example. Xander was sleeping over his grandmother's house, and for whatever reason, he didn't want to go to bed. Now, it's mind-boggling because he is the type of kid that when he's home, he goes to bed every night, 10 o'clock, like clockwork, doesn't argue, doesn't whine or complain. He is very in his routine. 9:45, he takes a shower. 10 o'clock, he goes to bed. No arguments. Well, this particular night, he was sleeping over his grandmother's house, and he didn't want to go to bed. And he was recording himself on his cell phone, on his iPad. And he was recording this video. I don't know why. He
likes to watch YouTubers, and if you've watched any of this young generation of YouTubers, they record themselves doing anything, doing pranks on people. So he was at this point jumping on the bed and jumping off of the bed. So he was doing all these tricks for his imaginary YouTube channel.
Yeah. So his grandmother was telling him, come on, it's late. It's 11 o'clock. It's time for you to go to bed. And this kid is saying, you're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you. And she's saying, well, your mommy said you're supposed to go to bed at 10 o'clock. Well, then tell her to come home and make me go. And when I go, because periodically we go through his phone. We want to see, make sure what he's looking at. I mean, he's controlled with what he can access, but he has a chat app with his friends and stuff like that. So I go through it to make sure we monitor what he's saying and who he's chatting with and all that. And I come across this video and I was like, I can't believe the way this kid is talking to his grandmother. So we sit him down and we show him the video and we're like, this is not okay when grandma's watching you. So meanwhile, when I bring it up to his mother, this is my ex-wife's mother, my ex-in-law. She didn't even tell his mom that he was being this disrespectful. So I brought it up to her and we discussed it together. And I said, Xander, this is unacceptable behavior. You respect your grandmother when you're in her care. She speaks for us. And yeah, she is like your mother. So you will respect and obey her as well.
She's not asking you to do anything wrong. She's asking you to go to bed.
Right. And if you have a problem with something she's telling you to do, you can discuss it with us and we can talk to grandma about it. But anyway, the point is that, and I said, do you see that? Grandma loved you so much that she didn't even tattle on you that you were being so disrespectful. But I'm telling you that being disrespectful, but I said, I had it just the way I'm saying it now is the conversation that I had with him. There was no need to beat him with a chancla. There was no need for physical force. He was like, okay. And I don't know if grandma is covering up for his disrespect or if the disrespectful behavior but we have no reports of any disrespectful behavior. And I believe his mother told her, like, if he does that again, let me know. So, these are things that we can just have discussions. Kids are capable of logic if you practice logic with them. If you don't teach them logic, if you just teach them force, they understand force. If you teach them logic, they understand logic, and their IQs grow from an earlier age. And this is a philosophy that, thank God, I was exposed to when Xander was very young. So I never had to make, not that I've not made mistakes, like screaming at him during a video game is certainly a mistake, but I've never crossed the threshold, thank God, of physical.
And
violence.
I think what happens is we tend to say, well, he's too young to understand, so I'm just going to beat him because he doesn't understand now. And then when he's older, I'll teach him. But by the time he's older, he already understands. I only do this. If I do this, I'm going to get a beating. And there's no need to have a logical conversation. So he doesn't understand the logic behind why it's not okay to do something. And I think that is such a key, such an important part of the conversation. And yeah, we've had conversations with Xander about his behavior, and he's, we ask him, like, is there a reason why you feel this way? If you're not ready to go to bed, you can talk to grandma and tell her, grandma, I'm not really ready to go to bed right now. Is it okay if I stay up a little bit longer? And if she says no, then I'm sorry, but when you're in her care, you have to listen to grandma's rules. You're in her house. And so we can have these conversations with him. And like we said, he's a good kid. He's not a child that we have really any issues with at all. I mean, I think when he was younger, he was a little bit more into the temper tantrums. But as he's gotten older, he's grown out of that, and all of that through conversation. There has never been a need for us to raise our hands at him, to threaten him with violence, to say, I'm going to hit you if you don't do what I tell you. We talk to him, we communicate with him, and he's a really rational child. We can have conversations with him where he can rationalize through all sorts of things. Sometimes really it's surprising. Yeah.
The amount of maturity in some of his logical skills is.
But the thing is that,
I'm not bragging. We're not bragging, but we're just saying, like, this is, if you treat children with respect, if you treat them like sovereign beings, right? Our blog is called Sovereign in the City, and we talk a lot about being sovereign. Children are just as sovereign as adults are. You're born with your natural sovereignty. Your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's intrinsic from the moment you're born. And we don't own our children. They're not our slaves to beat as we please. Our children are in our care until they're able to care for themselves. But I think that's the problem, is what we have this view that we own our kids. Our children belong to us. No, they don't. It's our responsibility to care for them until they're able to care for themselves. But we don't own our children. They don't belong to us.
And I mean, a lot of people talk about, like, if anybody ever were to touch my child, I would go crazy. But if you're already teaching your child to accept violence from you, they're going to accept violence from
others.
anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And I understand that people have this belief, like, I got beat and I was good. Or, you know, there's a meme going around about, like, I got beatings and I suffer from this condition called respect. That's not respect. And there, trust me, there is a lot of trauma under there.
I mean, if you think about it, what does fear, I'm going to get to Trisha's comment in a second, but what does fear of physical punishment do, right? If a child doesn't understand right and wrong, but only fears punishment, when they think they can get away with it, when they think they won't be caught, then they'll still do it. You're not instilling a sense of morality if you're just instilling a fear of punishment. Now, sometimes, like Trisha's bringing up, so her older child was spanked and he's fine, quote unquote. And her second child wasn't spanked and is selfish. Now she's making a correlation. That correlation may not necessarily be true, but what I would say to that is, just because your first child learned discipline in spite of the fact that you spanked him doesn't mean that he learned it or she learned it because you spanked them, right? It could be that they also developed a moral compass regardless of the fact that they were spanked, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it was the spankings that did the teaching. And a lot of the research is really showing that now. Talk a little bit about neuroplasticity. Did we talk about that?
We did a little bit about the idea of how our brain gets wired. The more we do certain things, I mean, we were talking about how we become addicted to certain hormonal reactions, chemical reactions in our bodies, right? Anytime something happens, whether it's a trauma or something good, our body has a chemical reaction, and the more we do it, the more we become addicted to this chemical reaction in our bodies. So those who experience trauma and are in fight or flight mode constantly become addicted to that chemical cocktail. Yeah.
Sorry. I guess I was thinking more of in the neuroplasticity domain of how literally there are less connections in your brain. When you don't exercise logic and reason, the connections in your brain are less, right? So beating actually lowers brain activity. Spanking lowers brain activity. Physical force lowers brain activity. And that's how it affects the IQs of these children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to talk about, like, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, if I don't spank my kids, you know, some people are saying they're spoiled, they're selfish. There are other ways to discipline your children. Mm-hmm. The idea of, if I don't spank my kids, they're going to be selfish and they're going to be, you know, they're going to do whatever they want. That's not the case. You can have a conversation with your child. You can explain things to your children. It also depends on what you model to your child. Mm-hmm. If you have no self-control and then you want your child to have self-control, they're not going to understand the message. My mom or my dad does whatever they want, but then I'm not allowed to do whatever I want, or they don't have any type of discipline, but I'm supposed to be disciplined in a particular way. It's all what we model. Mm-hmm. Xander eats healthy food because we eat healthy food. You know, this is the lifestyle we have. We go to the park a lot. We take a lot of walks. He's into taking walks and going to the park and being in nature. You know, we participate in these things. We homeschool. And because we homeschool, we participate in the learning with him. We took an urban foraging class. We were all super into the urban foraging class. It was exciting for the three of us. The three of us were so involved in it that the person who was leading the class brought her son along as she was teaching the class. And the son, you know, he knows all about all of this because this is what his mom does. So I think at some point he was just like, oh, I have a friend. And he was trying to talk to Xander. And Xander was super interested in the foraging because we were also interested in the foraging. So there's a lot, you know, you can guide your children, mm-hmm. but you have to be willing to do the work. Parenting is a lot of work, but it's fulfilling work because you're building a connection with your child. We have, you know, we play Fortnite together.
Boom.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you have all this stress. it's understandable. We live in a stressful society, and a lot of that stress, I believe, is engineered for the purpose of control of the controlling class, whatever you want to call it. The stress is not your fault, and it's understandable. I have stress. Vanessa has stress. But we have to, for the sake of our children, we have to learn to deal with our stress without passing it on to them, without letting it trickle, right? They say shit runs downhill. We cannot allow that to happen. These are our children. We love them. We don't want to damage them, even if it's a little bit. You know, even if somebody says, there was somebody commenting before, like, you know, sometimes spankings are necessary. Even if one spanking causes my son to have one less neural connection, why would I want to do that? When I can discipline him in other ways, when I can guide him. Guiding him is preventative, right? I don't need to discipline him most of the time because of the way he's guided. He's guided to have a moral compass. He's guided to be respectful, to be compassionate towards other people, so that while not giving up his own liberties, right? Like setting healthy boundaries. It's not about just like bowing down to everybody else. No, you have freedom, you know, but you also are respectful and compassionate to other people. And if we guide him that way, then there's a lot of times there's not as much need for discipline because he's learning good values. So
very true.
Please don't let put your stress on your kids. And I know a lot of it tends to be like subconscious, and a lot of times we don't even realize we're doing it. But we need to become more mindful, conscious of what we're doing. That's what I was looking for the word conscious.
We also wanted to recommend, we've talked about these two books multiple times.
Yes, Grandma Kim, that was me debating Isaac about vaccines. Yes, on Anarchast.
We'll post the link. All right. Anything else?
No, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. What were you saying?
Oh, the books.
Oh, the books. Okay. Some great resources for learning techniques. You know, Getting the Love You Want is a guide for couples, but there's a lot of techniques in that book that are absolutely applicable in parenting as well. And
Getting the Love You Want talks about how our childhood traumas affect us in our adult lives and how we select partners based on our experiences in our childhood. So it helps to, you know, be aware of the impact that our decisions and the way we communicate with our children can affect our kids later on in life. Nonviolent communication is a great way to learn to speak to your children in a way that will get through to them. I mean, it's a great way to help you speak with anybody. This has been great for our relationship. We've learned to communicate with each other in a way that prevents us from becoming defensive with each other when we speak. And it's a great resource for parents who are looking to have a closer connection with their children. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We all want to have a great relationship with our kids. We want to be able to talk to them, express ourselves, have them trust us, you know? Of course, we want them to tell us what's going on with their lives. And yes, like Danny was saying, and somebody else was saying before, there's so much stress. There's so much stuff going on in the world. And the truth is, in my opinion, my beliefs at this point are that a lot of it is just distraction. It's intended to keep us distracted and angry. And then you don't have the bandwidth to deal with your kids at home. And then what ends up happening, they're getting their news from YouTube, or they're like being distracted by a bunch of other things too. And then that family connection isn't there. The more we remove focus from all of that stuff out there. I mean, there's I'm not sure if it's a Mother Teresa quote or something about like, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family first. And that's really where all of the change is going to happen. Yeah. Do the healing work for yourself. Figure out the areas in which you're still carrying trauma and responding to trauma in your daily life. And as you heal those things, you'll start healing your relationships with your children too. Your children are energetically connected to you. They carry your DNA. And as you do the healing work for yourself, that's going to change too. It automatically happens. There's a lot of science behind that too, so you can do the research for that. And I mean, it's really the only way that we're going to achieve any change in the world is if we start changing the dynamics within our families. And if in our families the dynamic is I'm the boss and I beat you into submission when I want you to do something, that's what we're modeling out in the external world.
And that's what our kids are going to go out and inflict on the world. They say that hurt people hurt people. So let's stop hurting our kids, and then they won't go out and hurt other people. And that's how we make the world a better place. Right?
Yep.
If you want more resources or to learn more about peaceful parenting, you can go to stopspanking.org. They have a bunch of resources there. Or you can follow the hashtags peaceful parenting or end chancla culture. Both of these hashtags have lots of posts that can lead you to more information about it. And you can learn more about the science of what we've talked about. We're not experts on the science, but we've seen some of the studies or read articles about some of the studies. I haven't read the studies themselves, to be honest, but a lot of it just is intuitive and makes a lot of sense. So you can check that out if you want more resources. I'll also put links in the video, so check back later or tomorrow. Check us out on sovereignlovestream.com and on our social media sites. We're on all the big social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. A lot of you are probably watching us on YouTube right now. I also like to talk a lot about Float and Minds.com. These are two alternative social media sites that are privacy-centric. They do not sell your information to anybody, and they are censorship-free, which in this day and age is hugely important. The big tech companies are openly admitting now they're going to censor certain information that is considered fake news or, conspiracy theories and all those things. So if you want a social media network that does not censor, check out minds.com and Float app. We're on both those platforms as well. We also stream on Float. So thanks again for joining us. We appreciate all the comments every week. We thank you for joining us. And I guess that's it.
Yeah, we hope you have a great weekend or the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you back here next week. Thank you.
Take care.